Welcome to the Southern California Horticultural Society. This is our, was it April? Yeah, April meeting. I'm your president, Laura Bauer, and this is also our, thank you. This is also our Ruth Borun Lecture Series 2024 presentation. So really excited to welcome Brian Kemble down from the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Just want to make a few quick announcements and then I'll turn the floor over. We have our next meeting for the Hort Society will be on May 9th. Mike Wood of Horachi Farms will be talking on edible plants, and that's going to be back at Friendship Auditorium. Also, we have a very special announcement of Alfred Hockenmeyer is going to have his garden available for a tour on May 4th. Okay. That will be, yeah, it's going to be really cool. That will be open for registration tomorrow. So you can see it on our website tonight and you can jump in. There's only 60 spots available right now, so make sure you get on that. I wanted to, also we will also have a couple of door prizes. So stay to the end and you may win either one of two books, our Ruth Bancroft book and the Ruth Borun Garden book are all going to be door prizes tonight, as well as several tickets for the Theodore Payne Foundation tour, which is happening tomorrow and Sunday, rain or shine. So without further ado, I want to thank Pasadena Heritage for letting us use this wonderful facility. This is the Blinn House, and this is the first time we've been here, so so far it's working pretty well, and we're very happy to be able to work with Pasadena Heritage. They also wanted me to show off this flyer. They have other events here, including Breaking Ground, the Legacy of Women Landscape Architects, which is coming up. So check their website. All right, and I'm going to hand things over to Lily Singer, another board member, and she's going to give a quick presentation on our patrons, the Borun family and Ruth Borun. So you're going to do the rest.
Okay. So the reason we are here tonight is to hear Brian speak. However, this is what, the fourth, is this our fourth lecture? So Ruth Borun was a really, really wonderful woman. She had this gorgeous garden in Brentwood that was originally on the property where Garrett Ekbo designed the backyard, and then it was modified a little bit. Chris Rosmini came in and made huge modifications, put in some ponds, and became one of Ruth's very, very best friends, and they traveled all over collecting plants to bring back to the garden. And it really is a showplace. So other years we've taken you guys over to the Borun Garden, and we'll do it again soon, but we've been really busy coordinating other events, so we haven't gotten over there. But Ruth really loved the Hort Society. She was a longtime member. It got to the point, as with many of our members, that it became prohibitively long to try and travel across LA to get to a meeting at Griffith Park. And no matter where we thought of moving the meetings, it has remained since the late 30s the best place for us to have meetings because it's centrally located. And the old ones love it. Some of the new people don't think that I'm attached to that place, but I've been going there since I was a teenager. So I love the Hort Society being at Friendship Auditorium. Anyway, that aside, so Ruth stopped coming to meetings when she got older, and she wasn't able to drive over there or get friends to bring her over. But she always wanted to share her garden, and the garden was always open, and she was always having people come to see the wonderful new plants that she had just put in and the old ones and their history. The garden had I wonder if anyone has done a count on the species that are in there, species and cultivars, but a very diverse garden. So in the middle here, you see Ruth's wisteria in one of its better days. Ruth loved her wisteria and actually painted her bedroom wisteria lilac purple. so that she had that color all year long. And the doors leading out into the garden from the bedroom were huge glass doors, so she could see the wisteria all the time. So unfortunately, 2 years ago, the wisteria got hit by boring beetles. An old plant hit by boring beetles because we had a heat wave. We had a long heat wave, very, very long heat wave, and it weakened the plant. So experts were brought in and the big stump was saved. And I know that new branches were coming out last time we were there, but it's going to take a while before it gets up and over the arbor where it used to be. So here's Ruth with her beautiful wisteria. Here is one of the wonderful ponds with the water. No, I don't want you to do that. I'm denying you. Oh, it's not a touch screen. I know I don't. And I'm here thinking it's a touch screen, and I'm Anyway, one of Ruth's favorite plants, by the way, was Matilaha poppy, and these pictures are being used without permission from Sunset Magazine, but they did a whole story about her Matilaha, and these are the pictures from it when she was much younger. Notice the wisteria purple clothing. So what else have we got here? So basically what I wanted to say tonight was how Ruth wanted to share her garden, and after she passed away in her 90s, her family, including her husband, who is 105 now, Dr. Borun, wanted to share some of her riches with the horticultural community. And so they called us and said, what can we do? And John Schustra, who was president of the Hort Society at the time, worked with Dr. Borun and worked out that we would have the Ruth Borun Lecture Series. And they gave us a big chunk of money. I won't say how much, but it was a big enough chunk of money to sustain this lecture series for a very, very long time and allow us to bring in people from out of town and some pretty high-end speakers and pay for them to have a hotel room and all that good stuff. I mean, we do that for our other speakers too, but we've been getting some good ones, Brian included. So they are underwriting this wonderful lecture series that if we do what we do, which is handle money well, we will have money in perpetuity to have this series go on year after year. So watch for our activities so you can see when we're next going to the Borun Garden. It's really wonderful. We had a great tour last year where we had, I don't know how many people in total came, and they came in shifts and people stayed. They didn't want to leave, and they stayed through many shifts, and then they came back, and it's a really great garden. You must see it someday. So with that, we just want to thank the Borun family, Dr. Borun and the daughters Borun and everybody else involved for helping to underwrite the Ruth Borun Lecture Series. And Dr. Borun is at home watching this on his computer, we're sure. And it was a great gift in the name of horticulture. Ruth she loved gardens, and she did some other really neat things with her money, by the way. And this is all, we're talking like she did it. She's not here. They're making decisions. But one of the wonderful things that she underwrote was a new propagation house at Descanso Gardens. So really, wonderful things that are being done with the accrual of money that this woman had. And Kathy?
One of the things I found out, she left a large bequest to the Mono Lake Committee that sponsored the scholarship. And I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, the other thing she loved was the Los Angeles Youth Orchestra. She once told me when I was there that she only gave money to two things, Theodore Payne Foundation and the Los Angeles Youth Orchestra. Well, it wasn't quite true, but everybody has benefited in wonderful ways because of the Boruns and Ruth in particular. And thanks, Boruns. So now I get to introduce Carol Bornstein, fellow board member, and she's going to introduce our speaker for the evening.
Thanks, Lily. Good evening, everybody. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Brian to you this evening. Brian just recently celebrated his 44th year at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, which is a pretty amazing accomplishment. He started there when he was 10 years old or something like that. Anyway, he is highly regarded as one of the most knowledgeable experts on succulents, all kinds of succulents, but I think probably agaves and aloes in particular. He's responsible as curator for managing the living collections at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, two Ruths tonight, which you will be hearing a lot about very shortly. He has published something like 600 plus articles having to do with plants from all over the world. He's a stunning photographer, and many of his images have appeared in a whole bunch of different books on plants. So I think we're in for a real treat. So please join me in welcoming Brian Kemble.
Thank you. Okay, so I titled my talk, All Plants Come From Somewhere. Some plants cultivated at the Ruth Bancroft Garden and their origins in nature. I recently read a gardening piece in which the author maintained that it was wrong to garden with non-native plants. So I got to thinking about this. It is true that our native species are part of a web of life that includes pollinators, mycorrhizal networks, and a whole host of interconnections between plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, etc. Preserving these networks is indeed important, and this is a great argument for protecting habitats and maintaining preserves. But to say that we should not grow any non-natives in our gardens is very problematic. Does anyone really think the gardeners are going to throw away all their roses and camellias and aloes and tulips because they come from somewhere else? To think this way is to radically underestimate the threats currently facing our natural world and the role we have to play in ensuring that future generations have as much botanical diversity as possible. If we were to grow only things native to where we are, then what would become of plants that come from places that get inundated by rising sea levels, or plants from places like Manhattan or Mexico's Federal District that are highly unlikely to ever be candidates for reintroduction programs? The threats to natural habitats are many, including urban expansion, clearing of land for agriculture, climate change, proliferation of introduced pests, and so forth. The sheer extent of the problem demands an all-hands-on-deck approach, including helping to ensure the continuance of species from elsewhere. We must protect our native species, preserving habitat, maintaining vigilance against introduced invasives and pathogens, but we must also help to ensure the continuance of other species whose original habitats are compromised and whose loss would leave us all the poorer. I have made dozens of trips to places near and far, seeking out drought-tolerant plants and exploring the places where they occur in nature. It brings me joy to see a plant in the place where it came to be. The topography, the rock types, the soil types, the associated vegetation, the look and feel of the place. Imbibing all of this instills in me a deep sense of connection to the plant and the whole ecosystem from which it springs. It is important to remember that all plants come from somewhere. Even hybrids derive from species that originated in some habitat and some actual place. And I've done a lot of hybridizing myself. I've made many hybrids, especially aloe hybrids, gasteria hybrids, agave hybrids, echeveria hybrids, cactus hybrids. And all of those come from building blocks that are species. And if we didn't have the species, we wouldn't have been able to create the hybrids. And those species are not only the building blocks of our hybridizing, but they are the building blocks of agriculture, they're the building blocks of pharmacology. They are really an essential part of our world. It goes without saying that plants from climates similar to ours are more likely to succeed in our gardens, and this is a good reason to seek out native plants, or plants from the world's other Mediterranean climate zones. However, these are not the only places to look. Some plants have broader adaptability and can succeed in conditions very different from their home turf. Experimentation is needed to learn what plants have what preferences and what their limitations are, and the sharing of experiences and insights between gardeners helps us all to feel our way toward success. The Ruth Bancroft Garden is a special place created by Ruth in 1972 to showcase her collection of plants with low water requirements. It is what we would call a preservation garden. It came about as a result of one person's vision and years of hard work, and it is our mission to maintain its look and feel. In this, we are guided by Ruth's design principles and the conservation easement overseen by the Garden Conservancy, a national organization dedicated to garden preservation. And we know very well what sorts of plants belong in Ruth's gardens, not only which genera she gravitated toward, but also what forms and colors and textures and juxtapositions appeal to her. We're always on the lookout for new plants, as long as we are satisfied they are things Ruth would have wanted to incorporate into her garden, even if they had not yet been brought into cultivation when she herself was accumulating plants. Okay, so we can turn off the lights now. And so there obviously is the Golden Gate Bridge, and there is Dudleya farinosa, which is native to right there in San Francisco. And there's Ruth standing in front of her big clump of Agave franciscini, one of the large agaves. She was very fond of agaves, and she liked anything with spikes on it, and agaves certainly have that. And so this clump got to be so big that it was occupying a large chunk of the garden. And when we finally built our building a few years ago, we had to clear away some of these agaves because they took up part of the footprint of where the building was going to go. So we had to get a crane to move them because they are enormous. And after having moved them, a lot of them are now blooming. So we've had a lot of them bloom in the last few years. They do make pups, as you can see there on the left, the little ones. So we can replant them again, but we'll never have as big of a clump as we had back in these times. And that is what the land looked like before Ruth started her garden. So you can see down here her iris garden. She has an iris garden too. And right there was the line where her garden, her original garden stopped and the new garden started, this area here. So that had been walnut trees. And those were all taken out. And they're big empty space. And the trenches you can see here are the irrigation lines being dug. And then right there is where they dug the pool in the center of the garden. So this is what it looked like before the garden existed. Now this is a busy boulevard with a median strip and 2 lanes on either side. And that's all housing back there. And so it doesn't look like that at all. But those trees were still there when I started 44 years ago. And this is Ruth's Folly. So there's a gazebo at the center. Actually, the 2 barrel vault shade houses on either side were built first, and then the folly to tie them together afterwards. And it was an architect friend of Ruth's who designed the folly. And there is the folly many years later, after the garden was filled in. You can see Euphorbia tetragona, Drosanthemum speciosum, and a Brahea palm, so lots of things that Ruth planted. And it's been wonderful for me because having been there for so long, I've watched these things grow from little plants to big plants. And actually, I am shocked when I go back and look at an old picture. It was that little back then because your conception of it grows along with it. And so there you go. Okay, so first I'd like to look at some aloes. So we have a lot of aloes. Aloes is a focus of mine, and I've been to see many, many aloes in South Africa, Namibia, Ethiopia, and Madagascar. And we can't grow all of those in the garden because some of them are too frost tender for us. But this is one, Aloe rubra violacea, which came from a collection in Yemen many years ago. Which has done very well for us. Peak bloom for it is about December. And behind you can see the yellow form of Aloe arborescens, which is the earliest arborescens form for us to bloom every year. Okay, Aloe plicatillus has recently been named Kumara plicatillus. Not everybody accepts that new genus, but anyway, under whichever name. So there it is at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, and a close-up on the right showing the flowers. A wonderful plant with stout trunk and a lot of branches, and each branch ends in a fan of leaves, so they call it the fan aloe. And here it is in South Africa. So on one occasion when I was there, it was in bloom, and there it is on the hillside. And that is all sandstone. Those are sandstone mountains, Cable Mountain sandstone. And the blocks of limestone come down and accumulate, and it's like a scree. And so if you were to go up to the base of this aloe and rummage around, you'd go down several feet before you came to any soil. It's just a big rock pile. And so this gets a really high amount of rainfall. It's winter rainfall. It's near Cape Town, but it's much more than we get, about 60 inches in its habitat. So it's an aloe, but it's a very atypical aloe, an aloe from a high mountain environment with lots and lots of rain. Now, we find in cultivation, we don't need to give it 6 inches rain. 20 inches is fine for it. But we only find that out by experimentation. Aloe mitriformis, the miter aloe. It's called the miter aloe because the shape of the leaf is like a mitre, a bishop's hat. And this is a summer blooming aloe. We associate aloes a lot of times with winter bloom because a lot of them do bloom in the wintertime or the springtime. But this is a summer blooming aloe. And it's very characteristic of it to have capitate, rounded heads of flowers on a branched inflorescence right around July, in the middle of the summer. And here are two places where I saw it in South Africa. So this was near Newwoodville, famous bulb area. And here the plants grew really large and really long. So that's about 6 feet of length. So they just grew along the ground. And then this was a place called Houdini Spa, nearer to Cape Town, and here they were much smaller, and they usually grew as a cluster of heads, but no more than about a foot or so across. So very different plants depending on the habitat where they occur. This is an easy aloe for us to grow. I know some of the books written on aloes, like the Guide to the Aloes of South Africa, were written by people who live in Johannesburg or that area in northern South Africa. That's a winter rainfall area. And the things that do well for them are not the same things that do well in Cape Town, where it's winter rainfall. And we're much more like Cape Town. So they'll say in the book, oh, this is a difficult aloe to grow, must be grown in a hot house under controlled conditions, da 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 da. And that might be true in Johannesburg, but it sure isn't true for us. A lot of these aloes, like mitriformis, are super easy for us to grow because where they grow is very similar to our climate. Aloe melanacantha. So the name melanacantha means black spine, and you can see the black spines. Actually, when they first come out at the middle, the spines are white, and then they blacken as they go. And if you grow it in too much shade, it'll stay white. But that's the way they do in habitat. They turn really black. And here it is in flower, a winter flowering aloe with the beautiful bicolored raceme. So a lot of aloes have this, where the bud color is a darker color, and then the flowers lighten when they open. And that gives the sunbird that pollinates them a clue. That's the zone to go for, right where the color changes. And so as the flowering proceeds, then that transition zone from red to pale yellow will move on up the raceme. Typical long tubular flowers of an aloe. Designed to hold nectar for a sunbird. Now, we don't have sunbirds here, but we sure have hummingbirds, and all the same plants that a sunbird would like, a hummingbird likes too. A hummingbird can just hover in front of the plant and feed. A sunbird can't do that, so they have to perch on the stalk and then insert their beak into the flower. And there is aloe melanacantha in habitat near Newwoodville. And in this case, forming large clumps. Sometimes they could be single, but in this locality, they make these big clumps of many heads. And here's another locality south of Springbok. And here they're growing on granite domes. So that orangey rock there is granite, and they're just growing on cracks right in the granite. So almost no soil. And those are crassulas growing among them there. See the ring of red crassulas growing around the aloe. They're just magnificent plants in cultivation, in habitat. A very different aloe, Aloe polyphylla. It's called the spiral aloe. I think you can see why. And this is an aloe from Lesotho. Lesotho is a small country surrounded by South Africa up in the Drakensberg Mountains. And this aloe grows about 8,000 to 9,000 feet altitude in an area where the rainfall is all in the summer and it's quite high rainfall and the winters are dry. So that's not very much like us. And furthermore, because it's high up in the mountains, it's quite cool. And this aloe doesn't like heat. It's a difficult aloe for us to grow in Walnut Creek. Much easier to grow in San Francisco than Walnut Creek. We're only 30 miles away from San Francisco, but it's a different world altogether. San Francisco never gets hot in the summertime, and they don't get cold in the wintertime, and we get both. So this aloe gets snow where it grows in habitats, so it doesn't mind cold. What it can't stand is heat. So we've actually killed a lot of these because we love it and we keep on trying, but it's not an easy plant. Now, this is a plant in San Francisco where it grows quite easily, and you can grow magnificent plants. It flowers about May. And there it is in habitat. So in the high mountains of Lesotho, it's treeless, it's a climax grassland, and the aloes grow amongst the grasses. Actually, there is a lot of excess grazing, and the habitat is in decline because of that, so there's not nearly as many aloes as there used to be. And if somebody doesn't fence off some of these populations, eventually the whole habitat's going to be too degraded to even have new aloes sprout. But they are wonderful, wonderful plants. And there is our assistant curator, Walker Young, sitting next to one to show you how large they are in habitat. The black tips are very typical of plants in habitat, and the beautiful, much branched, very compact inflorescence. And a close-up showing the leaves backlit to show the teeth shining, and a close-up of the flowers. And this plant is actually a lot sharper than it looks. So those teeth are sharp, and those tips are even sharper. And you can very easily stab yourself on these things. But, you know, it's kind of an honor to be stabbed by a plant like this. Okay, Gasteria. So Gasterias are related to aloes, also in the Asphodel family. And they all occur in South Africa. One spills over into Namibia, southern Namibia on the west side, and one spills over into Eswatini or Swaziland on the east side, but all species in the whole genus occur in South Africa. And this one here is Gasteria bicolor, which has been known by several other names, but it has this nice sort of propeller whirling leaf pattern and these tall spires of pink flowers. So this one is Gasteria acinacifolia. The name means leaves like a scimitar. And so that's true, it does have scimitar-shaped leaves. It also has very large rosettes. That rosette there is about 2.5 feet across, which is big for a Gasteria. And this plant makes these magnificent flower displays in the spring, as you can see here. So the inflorescence doesn't just go straight up. It starts going up and then it goes sideways. So you get all these horizontal crisscrossing racemes that make a wonderful springtime show. It does flower other times of the year, but the big show is in the springtime. Now, this plant we thought might be a difficult plant in a cold year. It grows right near the coast in South Africa where it never freezes. And so we thought we were really running a risk in a cold year. Well, as it turned out, we had a very cold year in 1990. We got down to 19 degrees at the garden. It stayed below freezing for 2 whole days, and this came out fine. So that just goes to show where a plant comes from and what it endures in habitat is not necessarily a good indication of what it can take. Maybe it had an ancestor that lived at a higher altitude in the past and it kept those genes when it moved downhill. Maybe it lived through, cold time in the Pleistocene when it was subjected to things it's not subjected to anymore, and it still has retained some of that gene pool. You don't know until you try it. So Ruth was always in favor of trying it. The flowers, typical gasteria flowers. Gasteria flowers, unlike aloe flowers, dangle, and they usually have a fat base and then a greenish tip. And they, like aloes, are pollinated by sunbirds. So the sunbird would perch here and stick its beak right into that and get the nectar. So gaster, of course, means stomach, and that's because of these pot-bellied flowers. So this is its habitat. So right on the other side of this ridge here is the beach. So we're right near Port Elizabeth, right near the beach. This entire hill here is one big sand dune. So nothing but sand. And that's where it grows in habitat. Now we are in clay soil in an inland location with much colder winters than this. And it's amazing that it does well for us, but it does just fine. And there it is in habitat, showing a young plant. So like a lot of gasterias, it starts out disticus, leaves are all in one plane, and then as it gets older, then the leaves start to whorl, like this. So that's the same species, just two different stages of its life. You might recognize Crassula muscosa growing here. That's widely cultivated around the world. Okay, Crassula. Crassula is a very large genus, the type genus of the Crassula family, the stonecrop family, and sort of the equivalent of sedums in North America for South Africa. So most of the Crassulas are quite small, kind of ground covery sort of things, like this one here, Crassula radicans. The whole plant in bloom is only 6 inches tall, so it's really a miniature. But there are large crassulas too, like the jade tree, one of the giants of the genus. Okay, this one's Crassula rupestris. It has a sprawling habit, and here it is at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. The ruddy cheeks are a wonderful feature of it. It's quite a variable plant. Some plants turn different colors than others. Some are more bluish than others. This one's a rather bluish form here. And there it is in flower with these flattened heads of tiny white flowers, a bee-pollinated plant. And there it is in habitat, growing right out of a rock. There's just a little pocket in the rock there, and that was enough for it to get started. And because there's very little nutrient, this plant has turned really colorful. And a lot of plants are like this. The colors that they turn are a response to the nutrient levels that they experience. So if you want the color to come up, don't fertilize it too much, because then the natural colors will come out. And that's what the habitat looks like. And it's on these rocks where they're growing in the little cracks. So you can see in this habitat, the hills, this is near Caledon in southern South Africa. But the valleys are quite fertile, and they're all farms. So whatever is growing there is not there anymore. But these hills are nice and rocky, unsuitable for agriculture, so they're just full of wonderful native plants. This is an area where there's lots of Proteaceae, Restionaceae, lots of composites, aloes, a lot of interesting succulent plants. And there is Crassula rupestris in habitat in two different places. This one's in the Little Karoo going with a glottophyllum, and this one here is farther inland, but you can see how wonderfully colorful these plants are when they're in exposed positions. Crassula deceptor from a much drier area farther northwest in Namaqualand. And this one has very puffy leaves that are closely stacked together, grows in a very dry area, and has a very waxy epidermis to keep from losing moisture. And the leaves are, closely bunched together. If you grew it in too much shade, they'd separate. It would lose its character altogether. And its flowers are very, very tiny. I wouldn't say especially beautiful, but that's what they look like. So this is a winter rainfall plant, but 5 inches, 4 inches, 3 inches of winter rainfall, not 20 inches like we get at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. So for us to grow these plants that are winter rainfall plants but don't get nearly as much rain as we do, we have to give them super good drainage. So drainage, drainage, drainage. Now our natural soil at the Bancroft Garden is clay, which has poor drainage. So we're always building up mounds, adding rocks, making the drainage better. There is the habitat where crash-lady Deceptor grows. Right, this is the aloe glauca, and right at the foot of it, I found the plants growing, and that's what they look like in habitat. Very tight. Isoaceae, this is the ice plant family. So this is a huge family. There's about 1,800 species in the family. A lot of people have a negative impression of the ice plant family because of Carbobrotus and its invasiveness at the beach. Well, there's 1,800 species in the family, and you're not going to judge it by one. People do the same thing with eucalyptus. They blame the blue gum and think that all eucalyptus are bad. Well, we have a lot of eucalyptus at the Bancroft Garden that we've had for 40 and 50 years that have never made one single volunteer seedling. So you don't worry about all of them. You just watch out for the bad actors. So this is Lampranthus spectabilis in bloom in the spring. That's just in bloom right now. So it started a week ago, but makes a spectacular display. And Ruth used this a lot for spring color. When the garden first started and a lot of the things weren't mature enough to bloom yet, ice plants was a go-to plant for spring pizzazz. Okay, there are some genera in the Isoaceae that are West Coast natives, in other words, from the western side of South Africa where the rainfall is in the winter, and these are ones that are especially good for us because they like dry summers that we have, and they like the rainfall in the wintertime like we have. Now, a lot of times they get less rain than we get, so once again, super good drainage is important. So this is Chirodopsis, and almost all the Chirodopsis are winter rainfall. Chirodopsis robusta, with its beautiful pallid finger-like leaves and very large flowers. And there it is in habitat in South Africa. And you can see other things it grows with, euphorbia and a very rocky landscape, lots of various ice plant family relatives, mesems in this area because they are so numerous. So with 1,800 species, about 1,500 or more of those come from South Africa. So this family is very concentrated geographically in South Africa. It's a big part of the reason why South Africa has more succulents than any other country in the world. In fact, about 40% of the succulent species in the whole world come from one country, South Africa. Chirodopsis denticulata is a little bit of a larger plant with longer leaves. The name denticulata refers to the teeth on the leaves, but some plants don't have that. Here you can see a tooth there, a couple teeth there, a couple teeth there, but not very many. Some plants are toothy, some not, and that's variable. The flower color is also variable. Could be more yellowish like the one on the left or whiter like the one on the right. Could be a pale salmony color, but very large flowers, and peak bloom for this is in February. And here it is in habitat in South Africa, growing with lots of other succulents around too. There's an Adromiscus there. There's various other Isoaceae, and that is a Tylocoden there in the Crashla family. Another genus of winter rainfall plants in the Isoaceae is Cephalophyllum. So these are excellent landscape plants for California because they like winter rainfall, they're easy to grow, and some of them grow as a tuft and stay, in one place. Some of them are more like ground covers like this one and spread, but brilliant flowers, and February again is their peak bloom. So this one, rigidum or Oreorubrum is a synonym, and that name referring to the golden in the middle of the flower and the orange or red on the outside. And there it is in habitat in South Africa. I was there late for the flowering time, but I found a plant with one flower on it. these plants go through long, dry summers with no rain at all. And they can look a little bit ratty by the end of the summer, but they're well adapted to go through that and then come roaring back when the rain comes. Okay, agave. Agave is a genus that's concentrated in Mexico. There are agaves that go down into northern South America, agaves that grow in the United States, agaves in the Caribbean basin, but Mexico has the most. And we have a very good agave collection at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. That's agave ovatifolia there. So agave parasana. Ruth had this plant planted in the Bancroft Garden when I first started, and I didn't know what it was. She just had it labeled agave species from Coahuila. And so I went to Coahuila to try to find it, and it took me 3 trips before I finally did find it, because it doesn't grow near any road. It grows up in the mountains where it's not easy to get to. But it's a beautiful species and characterized by wonderful bud printing. So bud printing is the leaves form in a cone at the center of the rosette, tightly pressed together. As they mature, they peel off one by one. And in some species like this one, they have a strong embossed impression of the neighboring leaves that remains on the leaf and makes these wonderful patterns. You can see the teeth from the neighboring leaf permanently embossed into the fiber of the one next door. So that's really a nice trait. And when it blooms, has an unusual flower habit. So the season's pretty short where it grows up in the mountains in northern Mexico. And so it starts blooming in the fall of one year, and it goes up like this and then stops right there. And then it waits out the winter. And then that gives it a head start the following year when it actually makes its branches and comes into flower. And so as a result, it's sitting there for months on end with this spike coming up and waiting out the winter. And in order to protect the growing tip, you see how big and fat and thick those bracts are. That's for protection over the winter. And then when it comes into bloom, has these red buds and yellow flowers. It's just stunning. And a close-up showing a plant on the left, and a close-up showing the inflorescence on the right. So a lot of agaves are blue-green or silvery blue or something like that through their whole life. And then when they flower, other colors come out in the stalk, like in this case, or in the rosette. So there's a lot of colors that happen in the final phase of the agave's life. This is the habitat where agave parasana grows near Parras, Coahuila. And so there, if in Mexico, a lot of places, if you're in the mountains, you have pine trees. And that's true here. You can see the pine trees. And if you are down in the desert below, there will be no pine trees at all. So if you want pines, go uphill. After you get about 5,000 feet, you'll find pines. And so here in this habitat, we have a yucca carnarisana. We have a Dazzlerian, Berlandieri, I think that one is. And we have these agaves growing amongst them. And there's agave parasana in habitat. And here it is growing with a Dazzlerian and yuccas. And you can see looking down into the plains below. Agave shawii. So this is one of our few agaves that occurs naturally in California. It only grows right near San Diego, and it's almost been extirpated by encroachment from housing and development in San Diego. So the ones that remain are on the Navy base. So the Navy sometimes can preserve habitat that otherwise would have been lost. And this is a wonderful agave. It grows really easily for us in California because it's native to here. It likes our weather very well. But it also has these wonderful teeth that glow when backlit, and that's a great trait. For us, it's very reluctant to flower. We've had it in the garden for almost 50 years now, and it's only flowered once. So I don't know, some agaves flower more readily than others. This one's reluctant to flower, but it grows just fine. And there it is on the Navy base in San Diego in flower. And a close-up of a plant. Actually, it's bat pollinated. And because the bats are not much present anymore in San Diego, it doesn't get very effectively pollinated and has poor seed set. Farther south in Baja California, where there's still lots of bats, it has much better seed set. Okay, agave colorata. So this is an agave from the Sonoran Desert. So we do have Sonoran Desert in the United States in southern Arizona, but this agave does not grow there. It is farther south in the state of Sonora. And here it is at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. It grows really well at the Bancroft Garden. We don't have a bimodal rainfall pattern in California like they do in the Sonoran Desert. So they have the gentle winter rains and the summer monsoons, but with a little irrigation in the summer to give it the other half of its diet, then it does really well. And so here is the rosette, and the stalk comes up like this and then goes sideways. That's always the way it is. And just like agave parasana, it has these red buds and then more yellow as the flowers open. It's a rather short inflorescence for an agave, but one that does really, really well for us. And there it is growing through Ruth Bancroft Garden. So you can see here that there is a little bit of banding on the leaves, these dark and light bands. And this is something that it gets a lot of in habitat, but it's very difficult to get it to do in cultivation. We don't know what is this secret to make it do that, but it doesn't do it very much in cultivation. And here it is in habitat. You can see how much stronger that banding is. This is the type locality here, a place called Peñasco Blanco. It's a rock outcrop in the middle of a dry, dusty, thorn scrub plain with these beautiful agaves growing all over the place. Columnar cacti too. It's much hotter than we are and doesn't get down below freezing in the wintertime, but it tolerates it just fine. Easy plant for us to grow. That's what the habitat looks like. That's the type locality. Okay, agave Victoria resonant. This is the well-known agave, Queen Victoria's agave, widely grown because it's so ornamental. Who could turn down a plant like that in their garden? It does very well in pots. It's such a formal plant. It lends itself to being in a pot, but it does fine in the ground too. It's pretty cold tolerant and just a magnificent species. So just to show the variation, this is a plant I grew from seed, and the white lines here are very thin and actually turn into little rows of dots. And here is a much more compact plant with very short leaves and very heavy white lines, just variations of the same species. And here's where it grows in Mexico, near Monterrey. This is a place called Huasteca Canyon. So this is limestone, but the folding of the rock strata has resulted in these slabs of rock going sheer vertical, so sideways from the way that they were laid down. And the agaves grow all up on there, on these rocks. And some places you can actually get at them, and here you can see the limestone rock and the agaves. So in this locality, they were all single. In this locality, there's pups coming out. So sometimes they make pups, sometimes they don't. It varies from plant to plant. Oftentimes the more smaller, compact ones will offset more than the larger ones. And here is one in flower. So you can see when it dies when it blooms, and here it is turning yellow as it's on its last legs. And the flowering has progressed from where it started there to this point, and will work its way all the way up there before it's finished. So the impression you get when you look at this stalk is green at the top and yellow there. But really the flowers are white. There's a close-up of the flowers there. The yellow is the pollen, and the green is the unopened buds, but the flowers are white. Now that there is very, very unusual. That's a twin, a flower that, or two flowers that are joined together. Okay, agave bracteosa. This agave grows in the same canyon with Victoria reginei. Usually Bracteosa will be in shadier places, and Agave Victoriae reginae will be in sunnier places, but not always. Sometimes they can grow together. Very, very easy plant to grow, and an agave that does well in shade. So if you need an agave in a filtered light situation, like under a tree or something like that, this is a great choice. It doesn't look like a typical agave at all. No teeth on the sides of the leaves. The leaves are very flexible. It's not a user-unfriendly plant like some of the agaves are. That's a variegated version there. And this is what it does when it flowers. The name Bracteosa because of those amazing bracts. So this is the inflorescence coming out, and each flower pair, there's a flower pair and there's a bract, right? So when it first starts to come out, the bracts are so thick you can hardly see the buds. And then a little bit later, as it elongates and the buds expand, then you can see the buds and the bracts too, and then there it is in full bloom. So it looks so different at the different stages, but it's wonderful at every stage. And there it is in flower at the Bancroft Garden. So this species does not flower every year, but what a show it makes when it flowers. And it's especially wonderful early in the morning or late in the afternoon when the sunlight catches those inflorescences and all those thousands of flowers just glow. And here it is in habitat. And here is a picture. I told you sometimes it grows with Victoriae reginae. Okay, Agave impressa. This is an agave from a completely different habitat. This one comes from Sinaloa on the west coast of Mexico, and it's very, very tropical where it grows. So this agave does not like cold at all. It's got amazing white lines like Victoriae reginae, but a much bigger plant, much more sword-like leaves. And there it is, growing it through with Bancroft Garden. It hasn't flowered for us yet. And there it is in habitat. So at a dry time of the year, the plants can take on amazing colors. If you look down below here, that is a mango plantation. That shows you we're not in a cold place. And out there in the distance is mangrove swamps on the coast. So this is an agave that does not like cold, and you can't convince it to like cold. So you just have to, we grow it under cover in the winter. Just showing how beautiful they are. Okay, a few cacti. This is genus Phaerocactus, or they call it barrel cactus a lot. This is Phaerocactus pottsii from Sonora. Phaerocactus viridescens, one of our native California cacti. So this one grows right near San Diego. You can find it at Torrey Pines State Park. It also grows southward into Baja. The name viridescens means becoming green because the flowers, which are usually yellow, can become greenish. So some plants are greener than others, and quite spiny like Phaerocactus usually are, and spring blooming. And there's the habitat, Torrey Pines. That is Pinus torreyiana right there. And so amongst these bushes, you can find the plants, and there is one in bloom in habitat right there. Now, this is a winter rainfall plant. Not very many cacti are winter rainfall. The cactus family, the great majority of the cactus family is from summer rainfall places. So which ones will take winter rains is something we have to find out. And we're always trying things, and find some will put up with it fine, others won't. But always drainage, drainage, drainage. Because if you don't have that drainage, they won't make it through the wet winters. Phaerocactus acanthides, another California native. This is the common Phaerocactus in the deserts, like in Anza Borrego and the Mojave Desert. And very, very spiny plants, interwoven spines, and usually yellow flowers. I was just down in Anza Borrego looking for this species because there are some plants in Anza Borrego that have green flowers. Not very often, but sometimes. And so I was hoping to get a picture of a really green flowered plant. I found yellow green, but I didn't find a really green one. But they're wonderful plants and can take very, very arid conditions. But we can still grow it at the Bancroft Garden. And here they are in habitat in the Mojave. And if you look at that landscape there, there's not a lot growing there. And it is amazing that that plant will tolerate our 22 inches of winter rain, but it does. And that's the green flowered one from Anza-Borrego. I took that years ago, and I didn't find one as green this time, but they're wonderful. And this is the same species growing in Baja California, where they can get really tall. And that plant there was almost 10 feet tall. Now, how did I get up on top? That was a different plant that was shorter. Okay, Dudleya. So these are iconic plants of the California coast. This one here is Dudleya brittoni, which actually doesn't occur in California, but across the border right by Tijuana. Dudleya farinosa, this is the common Dudleya we have in the Bay Area. They can be very powdery and glaucous like this, or they can lack the powderiness and be green. So if they're green, they have a waxy coating to protect them from the sun. If they're the powdery kind, they have the powder to protect them from the sun. But in some places, both grow right together. And they have pale yellow flowers in the summertime, like you see here. And there, I started off with this picture, going by the Golden Gate Bridge. And this is another population in the southwest corner of San Francisco where the plants have more glaucousness. But I love the way that the flower stalks are so red and contrasting with the pale yellow flowers and then the multicolored rosettes. They're just beautiful, beautiful plants. They're super easy for us to grow. This plant made the news a couple years ago when there was a couple of sting operations where they caught people trying to smuggle them out. And it's really a sad thing because these grow very fast from seed. From seed to flowering, 2 or 3 years. And you dig one up and its chances of reestablishing are very, very low. And they don't tolerate climates that have muggy weather in the summertime. They were being smuggled to Asia. And Western Asia, or rather Eastern Asia, does not have any winter rainfall climate zones. So if you're living in Korea, you're not going to have this plant do well for you in cultivation. It's just going to decline and decline and decline and die. And if you were going to succeed with it because you had controlled conditions in a greenhouse, and you'd be much better off growing it from seed where it would be from birth accustomed to your conditions. But a dug up plant, no. And so hopefully these places where the plants were stripped out, there's still a seed bank in place and they'll grow back. But always grow it from seed. Don't dig it out of habitat. Okay, that's the end. And I just want to encourage you to come visit at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. We're in Walnut Creek, just 30 miles east of San Francisco. We're open every day of the week except Monday. And there's something going on all year long. Okay, any questions? Got a question?
So you all don't have agave beetle up there?
No, we don't. So there is an agave snout beetle that is very destructive and can destroy your agaves, and we do not have it. There are lots of cases like this of pests that come along and then spread and become prevalent, and we hope that doesn't happen to us. It has happened with a different agave pest, agave grease mite, and we didn't used to have that, and we do now. We didn't used to have aloe mite, and we have it now. So sometimes these things come along, and when you do, then you have to contend with them, but it's nice if you don't have them.
And how do you contend with the aloe mite?
The aloe mite is very difficult to get rid of. We will dig that plant up and throw it away if it's one we can replace, and otherwise we have to toggle between different miticides and rotate them over a 6-month period to try to get rid of it. It's very, very hard to get rid of. So if it isn't a really rare plant that we can't replace, we'll just throw it away. Yeah, Carol.
For some of the plants you talked about that are really sensitive to your 20 inches of rain that, you know, usually only get 5, 6, or 7, do you ever put those out of the rain? You know, put them in a protected spot so that they don't?
Yes. So what we do is we take advantage of tree canopies. So there is, you know, a place at the base of the tree where the sun shines in under the canopy and get a lot of light, but you get some rain shelter and frost shelter overhead from the tree canopy, and that's where we'll plant things. And then we'll just use lots and lots of rock to make the drainage superb. In some cases, we do have plants growing right out with nothing overhead at all, getting the full brunt of the rain, and just by sheer drainage, we get them to succeed. But we don't know a lot of times when we first try to plant it whether it will take that or not. So we try and see. And if it doesn't, you know, it's obviously declining, losing its roots, and we're afraid it's going to die, we'll dig it up and we'll move it to a more sheltered place. But we'll try it out there in the full brunt first to see if it works. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book or source of information for finding out where these plants are from?
Well, yes, I have a $10,000 library to help me with all this. No, because a lot of the plants that I like are rather specialized. So for the Cactaceae, I have 3 books on Pherocactus. I have 2 books on Lobivia. I have 2 books on Notocactus. I have, you know, it goes on and on. And so I have the philosophy that when a book comes out, buy it. Because 10 years later, when it's out of print, you know, you're going to regret that you didn't. And so I have an enormous library, and it's practically taken over my house, but that's what I look up things in. If you're a beginner and just want to know a few common plants, then you obviously wouldn't need to go to that length. But I need to, because I write articles about them, I do research on them, and so I need to have the books that have that information. And a lot of times, the internet is not a reliable source of information. The plants will be misidentified, the information won't be complete or will be incorrect, and so I want to go to the sources that I trust.
Brian, so I went visit your garden twice. And you also grow California native in a dry garden. So what's your take on growing native together with exotic?
Yeah, so we have one side of the garden that is primarily natives. And we're not real strict. Like, for example, we have native ephedras, and we also have an Asian ephedra and a South American ephedra growing with them. We have cacti native to California, like Pherocactus viridescens and Pherocactus acanthodes, but then we sneak in some Baja ones too. After all, what's the difference between Baja California and California? A line somebody drew on a map, you know? We're just part of Mexico that got stolen. That's what we are. Yeah.
Are a lot of these plants readily available in commercial nurseries?
Well, depends on what commercial nursery. The succulent world is sort of a specialized world. And so Vista in northern San Diego County is the epicenter for succulent nurseries in the whole country. And that's where the biggest selection is. There are places like Mesa Garden in New Mexico where you can mail order plants, but your best bet is to drive down to Vista and visit those nurseries where they grow all kinds of things. Now, other sorts of plants, like for example, Proteaceae, Joe O'Connell's nursery in Ventura County is a place for those, or Gondwana flora up in the Bay Area. But there's different places where you go for different kinds of plants. These are not plants that you're going to find in, you know, every Walmart garden section. These are plants where you really have to seek out the people who grow them, and they're a special breed. Yeah.
Have you had any success propagating the aloe polyphylla, the spiral owls?
Success probably in alfalfa. Well, we grew a lot of them from seed, and we put them out, and we sort of killed them one by one. Eventually, we'll either find a place where there's just the right exposure, and we can get away with it, and we'll be happy, or else we'll give up eventually. But I just love them, and I wish we'd find the right spot. Yeah.
I have a question about things like aloe, yucca, some of these ones, removing the dead leaves. We have a garden near the ocean, there's a lot more humidity, and I feel that when we were taking off some of the dead leaves, I saw a lot of mold in there. Would you recommend kind of defoliating a lot of the dead growth on desert species when it's kind of in close proximity to a more humid, cool ocean situation?
Ruth was very much against removing dead yucca leaves. So she always left that skirt on there. The only time she didn't is when the plant was relatively near the path and the old leaves were sticking out and poking people, and she felt she had to. Or in one case, the yucca thing becomes such a big thicket that there was a rat colony going on in the middle, and she felt she had to do something about it. But other than that, she would not remove them. She thought that natural skirt of dead leaves was part of the plant's look, and she didn't want to alter that. And if you see a plant like Yucca rostrata, commonly sold in nurseries with all the leaves clipped off, it looks so much better with those leaves on there. And there are plants like Yucca querétoroensis, Yucca linearifolia that have needle-like leaves, and that skirt is so perfect, it's so beautiful and so neat. Why would you ever take that off?
Well, I'm thinking more just the humidity and the cool moisture that would build up on a plant.
I don't think that is harmful to yuccas. Of course, we're not a coastal garden in Walnut Creek, but when I see yuccas grown without the leaves taken off in San Francisco, which is about as cool and coastal as you can get, they do okay. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have trouble with that?
Theft. Well, yes, we do. You can't be a public garden and not have trouble with theft because there's a lot of wonderful people in the world, but not everybody is wonderful. And so things disappear. Now, when we made a garden out on the sidewalk, we thought instead of just having a wall and then a sidewalk, we ought to have a part of us on the outside, right? So we planted a garden on the outside, and we knew that was a setup for theft because we can't be there all night long to watch it. So what we try to do is plant plants that were formidable out there, big feral cactus, big agave, things you'd pay for it if you tried to take that plant. And so yes, we do get some theft, even in the garden. People pluck a rosette and things like that. And you just have to live with that because if you're going to have people come and enjoy your garden, you're going to have some bad actors come through too. So that's the way it is. Okay, well, thank you very much.